Hey everyone, in today's video I want to showcase my complete Thorns build for Path of Exile. The gameplay you just seen was from one of the many runs I've done of the Uber Arbiter, and I'll have more gameplay from different endgame content at the end of the video. If you're interested in seeing how Thorns currently performs in the 0.3 update, Thorns is definitely better than what it used to be. However, there are still some improvements that I would like to see, like some AoE clear that actually uses Thorns damage. With my current setup, I was able to push my Thorns character to the absolute max amount of damage possible without sacrificing too much survivability. The sole focus of my build is to stack life, armor, spirit, and gain damage as extra damage. I currently have 3000 life, 314 spirit, and almost 30,000 armor, and our minimum Thorns damage is 9652, and our maximum Thorns damage is 34,000. And keep in mind, this is in the hideout, so this is without scavenged plating stacks. For a quick showcase, if we just quickly go to any random map and we gain our scavenged plating stacks, as you can see, our damage is between the 22,000 and 55,000. Now, most of our damage just comes from physical Thorns damage, lightning thorn damage, and chaos thorn damage. But you'll notice that the lightning thorn damage isn't all that great because the minimum and maximum range is so large, with the minimum only being 600. It's still good for damage, as we do gain a percentage of that damage as chaos damage, but I found that physical and chaos damage scaling to be a lot better overall. Also, with all 10 scavenged plating stacks, you see that our armor is sitting at around 50,000, which is then also applied to elemental damage. Now let's quickly go over everything that lets us achieve all this damage in the first place, starting with the skill gems. Now there are two variations of this build you could play. One is with a spear, and the other one is with a mace. And I find myself switching between them quite often, so depending on what playstyle you like the most, just stick with either or. Now for the spear setup, I have spear stab, which is slotted with exploit weakness. This lets us remove the broken armor status from enemies, allowing us to break their armor again to then gain scavenged plating stacks. We have rapid attacks just for some increased attack speed. And then we have barbs 3 that we can deal Thorns damage twice on the next hit after you've retaliated with Thorns. This basically only allows you to use this support gem if you've dealt your Thorns damage to the enemy beforehand. This is pretty nice as well because you can use barbs 3 along with barbs 2, and both are separate damage instances. So you can have 6 stacks of barbs 2 along with dealing damage twice with barbs 3. Now we also use raised shield just for some active block if you need to block any specific damage that you think that might kill you. Then we use rapid attack. This is our primary damage skill. You want it to be as low level as possible with 5 sockets. However, the level and quality do not matter. All you need is a low level with 5 sockets, and you want to slot in rapid attacks 3 for some increased attack speed, barbs 2 so you can deal your thorn damage on the next 6 hits after you've retaliated with thorns, then quill burst so that you can trigger quill burst on the next 3 hits after you retaliate with thorns. This just lets you deal thorns damage in an AoE area, however the area of effect is very low. Then we have armor break 3. This is to break armor equal to 20% of our physical damage, and also allows us to gain an endurance charge when we fully break armor. This is nice because our physical damage that we deal is our Thorns damage, so we break armor equal to 20% of our physical Thorns damage. And then I have in here Ancestral Call. This basically just creates 2 projections of yourself which also deal Thorns damage, allowing for slightly better clear. Then we have Voltaic Mark on the lowest level possible with 3 sockets. I'm still messing around with it a little bit, however what I've got slotted currently is Mark for Death. This is essentially the Warbringer node Anvil's weight, just on a skill instead. This just allows us to break armor at 10% of physical damage dealt. Then I have Prolonged Duration for some more skill effect duration. This just allows Voltaic Mark to stay on the enemy longer. And then for me personally, I'm using Life Tap since we're leeching life from our Thorns damage anyway. However, you don't technically need to use Life Tap with it. It just makes the cost easier to sustain. But all you really need is Mark for Death and Prolonged Duration. Now for Scavenged Plating, I have this on level 26. This is due to the level 20 gem with +1 corruption. Then I have a Prism, Diamond, and Physical Mastery with Diala's Desire. This allows us to have our thorns per scavenged plating to be a lot higher, sitting at 63 to 94 per stack. However, whenever we break an enemy's armor, we gain 1 stack of scavenged plating, and depending on the enemy type, if it's a normal enemy, we gain 1 stack, if it's a magic enemy, we gain 2 stacks, and if it's a rare enemy, we gain 5 stacks, and a unique enemy will gain us 10 stacks. This gives us armor and thorns damage, and we want to slot it with Thorns Skin 2, which costs an extra 40 spirit. However, this gives us an increase of 70% more thorns damage. Then prolonged duration, so that the scavenged plating stacks last longer. Physical mastery for the +1 level to the skill, and then Diala's Desire for the extra level and reservation multiplier. Now Diala's Desire is pretty expensive, so I wouldn't expect you to use this to begin with, along with the Prism of Belief Diamond either. However, this just allows me to scale the damage even further. Then our second spirit gem, we have Time of Need. This just gives us blessings which heal us and remove curses and ailments. This happens every 10 seconds. We slot this in with 70% increased thorns damage and compressed duration 2 for less skill effect duration, which allows our duration between blessings to be even lower, which will then proc this more often. Then we have Magma Barrier. This just gives us more block chance. You can technically use Magma Spray whenever you block, however you don't really need to. And then Thorn Skin 2 for more increased thorns damage. Then Charge Regulation. Since we're generating endurance charges, we gain 18% more defense while we have an endurance charge, and we just slot this in with increased thorns damage. Now for the charge regulation, you want to have a low level one, so it doesn't require you too much dexterity or intelligence. It will lower the amount of defenses you'll gain. However, the percentage that you gain from higher level ones is not worth the amount of attribute requirement for the actual gem. And for the last spirit gem, it doesn't really matter. I'm using Defiance Banner primarily just for the additional effect from quality, which gives us increased reservation efficiency, which then lowers the spirit cost of the actual spirit gem. And then I slot it in with Thorn Skin 2. Now the way that we actually gain our endurance charges is from our rapid assault. So whenever we fully break armor, we have a 20% chance to gain an endurance charge. And then if we're using the mace, I recommend going for this specific club here for the implicit of always hits. It's a pretty easy one to craft as well, and pretty cheap to buy bases. This just means we don't need accuracy, and it will always hit enemies that are even further away. However, if we're using the club, we want to use BONESHATTER instead of rapid assault, and we take rapid attacks, barbs 2, quill burst, armor break, and in the lineage support gem Rigwald, as this gives us 20% more attack speed if used in weapon set 1. And when we swap out our club, this will also change our normal attack to Mace Strike, which will then be slotted with Exploit Weakness, Rapid Attacks, and Barbs 3. This just depends on how you want to play. If you're using the club, we use BONESHATTER for the more attack speed. This just lets us move around faster, which is pretty nice for mapping. However, I enjoy using the spear as I'm primarily just doing endgame content like bosses in Simulacrum. Now for the gear, to begin with, this build is quite unique heavy, so it makes it slightly difficult to fill out our resistances. For the spear, you want to corrupt a 2 socket to a 3 socket and socket in the Runes of Agony for the extra damage as chaos damage, and for the actual affixes of the weapon, all we want is attack speed, leech physical damage as life, gain damage as extra physical damage, and spirit reservation. Now I spent a lot of currency testing different desecrations, weapons, gear. The spirit reservation is good choice if you want the base damage to be higher, as you can socket in more extra thorns support gems onto your spirit gems. However, you could go for the desecration for break armor equal to 4% of physical damage dealt, like on my club here, break armor equal to 4%. Either or is good. This essentially just lets you have the Warbringer node Anvil's weight on a Titan class instead. It is 6% lower than the actual Warbringer node. However, this lets you fully AFK armor break enemies without doing anything at all. And if you pair it with Wind Dancer slotted with Exploit Weakness, you basically have an infinite loop armor break on enemies, allowing you to sustain scavenged planes while AFK, which is super nice and could be something to mess around with. As for the other 2 prefixes on the weapon, it doesn't really matter. I just have fire damage and cold damage, which don't really add anything to the build. Now for the shield, I'm using the Prism Guardian with 1 socket, corrupted for spirit per maximum life. By default, this is 25, but corrupted you can lower it down to +1 spirit per 20 life, which is huge for stacking more spirit. So the more life we have, the more spirit we have, which then allows us to slot in more thorn skin support gems. The other stat you want on the shield is the all elemental resistances. The max is 20%, but I would recommend taking what you can get. The higher the better. For the helmet, almost every Thorns build will be using this. The crown of the Pale King. This allows Thorns damage to retaliate against all hits, not just physical melee attacks. You want one corrupted with 3 sockets, and to be honest, every other stat on this is pretty much irrelevant. Just try to get yourself a cheap 2-socket uncorrupted helmet, and then corrupt it for 3 sockets. Then socket in 3 stag talismans for a total of 150% increased Thorns critical hit chance. For the body armor, we are using the Brass Dome. This lets you take no extra damage from critical hits, which basically means all hits are normal hits. We still take the critical hits from the enemies, but the damage is as if it was just a normal hit. And all you want on this is a low negative resistance, high armor, and you can either go for a corrupted increased armor for more armor on the chest piece, or a 4-socket. Either of them is good. For the boots, we use the BRIARPATCH. You can technically go for different boots if you're not going for a Thorns crit build. However, these boots are gonna be used in almost all Thorns builds for the increased damage from critical hits. All you want on these boots is 25% Thorns crit chance with 3 sockets. You can get ones with 30% chance, so depending on how you want to build this, you may need the extra crit chance. However, you'll be sacrificing the extra rune socket for 5%. Now, the reason these boots are so useful is because this is 25% base Thorns crit chance, which is added to the base before any other modifiers. As you can see, if we go down to our crit chance here, if we remove the boots, we drop down to 19.8%, and with the boots we have 100%. Now, you could technically also go for a high movement speed roll on the boots. However, the movement speed on this character to begin with is super low, so I wouldn't recommend it, as it will cost you more currency to even buy one with good movement speed. Now, for the rest of the other gear, I crafted 3 of the rare items I'm currently using, specifically the belt, ring and gloves. For the belt, you want a armor base, so any plate belt would be good. I got one with 1 charm slot, however 2 charm slots would be way better. And on this belt we want physical Thorns damage, maximum life, and more armor, and the 3 suffixes are for filling out our resistances. I also sanctified this belt and got extremely lucky with the more physical Thorns damage, so I'm pretty happy with the belt. Now, for the gloves, these can be pretty expensive to buy or craft. I needed specifically certain stats on my gloves, and I couldn't buy any because there wasn't any on the market. And I was able to make these gloves fairly cheap for only 10 divine. It did require quite a few re-rolling of stats, but it's pretty good compared to prices on the market currently. All you want on these gloves is a good armor base. So you can go with massive mitts or val mitts, and then you want increased armor, then additive armor, and then a hybrid armor and life. Or you could even go for more life to maybe even squeeze out some more spirit. And then the expensive part will be buying the essence for increased effect of socket items. And then the last 2 affixes will be filling out your other resistances that you need as well. There's also a desecration for the gloves for instantly leeching life, which could be a good choice as well. Could save you a few points on the tree. However, these gloves are primarily expensive due to the essence, which changes a suffix to increased effect of socket items. As you can corrupt your gloves for 3 sockets and put 3 lightning thorn runes into them for 6 to 600 lightning thorns damage. Now, the essence I'm talking about is the essence of horror. This costs 4 divine for 1 essence, so you're already starting off pretty expensive to even craft the gloves. However, it's definitely a lot cheaper than buying a good pair on the market. And then you also have the RNG of corrupting the gloves for 3 socket as well. Now, for the rings, I'm using 1 unique ring called MING'S Heart Amethyst ring. This gives us some chaos resistance along with a huge damage increase of 50% extra chaos damage. As you can see, our damage gets increased by a lot whenever we equip the ring. Our maximum damage gets increased by almost 8,000 damage. I was trying to fit 2 of these rings onto the character, which would have been a lot of damage. However, the amount of armor, life, spirit and resistances we lose isn't worth having 2 of them on the build unless there is some way to fix the resistances. But even so, this ring comes with reduced life and reduced global defenses, and lower life means less spirit from the shield, which means less thorn skin support gems and lower armor from all of our gear. For the other ring, we want chaos damage, max life, elemental resistances and 2 other resistances you need. I went with fire resistance and lightning resistance, and then you want to use whichever elemental modifier to then increase the resistances to be higher, which will then also increase the 2 all elemental resistances. I used fire modifier to increase the fire resistance from 37 to 51, which then increases the 15% to all elemental resistances to 21%. And the adds cold damage to attacks doesn't matter. I was just really unlucky with crafting, but you could replace this with either increased lightning damage or evasion rating. And finally for the amulet, I'm using the solar amulet for the spirit base, along with maximum life, increased life, more spirit attributes, and elemental resistance. Now I did get a desecration for quality of all skills, which is somewhat useful for spirit reservation, specifically on the Defiance banner, as the quality increases the reservation efficiency of the skill by an extra 2%. However, there are several other good options, maybe even trying to get more chaos resistance on the amulet to increase our low chaos resistance of 36 by a little bit more. And on my amulet I have anointed the cooked node on the tree, which just gives us 60% increased crit damage bonus. However, there are many different options you can go for on the tree, and you can even change it depending on if it's cheaper to get it on a megalomaniac diamond or not. However, the cooked node comes with reduced defenses, but it's better than having reduced crit chance from Fruit Seeker. Unless you want the extra armor, then you could go for Fruit Seeker and then spend an extra point on the tree for more crit chance to reach the 100% crit chance cap. Now for the flasks, on the life flask I'm using Blood of the Warrior, but honestly the flasks don't really matter. I haven't changed them out since level 60. I have this Blood of the Warrior flask for the 30% of damage taken during effect recouped his life, but since we leech life all the time anyway, I haven't really had a need to use the flask to begin with. Same goes for the mana flask. I don't really use that much mana to begin with, so the mana flask doesn't matter either. As for the charms, if you have 3 charm slots, I recommend going for the immunity to bleed charm, the immunity to freeze charm, and the immunity to ignite charm. This is so you don't get frozen or take damage from bleed or ignite, as dot damage can be pretty lethal to our build, as dot damage just ignores all of our armor and just goes straight for our life, so it's pretty difficult to play the build without these charms. So I would always recommend going for these 3 charms if you have the 3 charm slots. Now for the actual tree itself, we're playing the Titan, which has some pretty good choices on the Ascendancy. Specifically, we want to come to the left, pick up the increased armor, and then pick up stone skin, 50% more armor from our equipped body armor, and our equipped body armor has a huge base armor of 2200, which is then increased by 50%. Then we want to come up the middle for increased strength. On the way we also get colossal capacity, which then gives us a chest to our inventory, as you can see right here. However, we're mainly wanting to go for the Hulking Form, which gives us 50% increased effect of small passive skills. This just turns all of our small passive nodes on the tree to be increased by 50%. And then the last 2 points we want to pick up life regen, and then we want to pick up Mysterious Lineage for the 50% more life, which then allows us to have more spirit from our shield. As for the actual tree itself, when I come down here, grab the armor, put in some strength nodes, and then we want to split off to pick up Relentless for the 15% increased armor, 10 strength, and regen, then some more armor, and then Sturdy Metal for the 80% increased armor from body armor. And we want to come down here to this armor cluster in the middle, which gives us a ton of increased armor, along with polished iron. We gain additional stun threshold equal to 30% of item armor on equipped armor items. This basically just makes us stun immune. And then down on the bottom we have Blade Catcher, defend with 200% of armor against critical hits. And this works great with the brass dome chest piece, as all critical hits are just normal hits now, and we also defend with 200% of armor against those critical hits that are now normal damage. We come down at the middle to pick up these extra strength nodes, so we have 12, 25 and 12, and this is where we split off, picking up the jewel socket, grabbing these 3 nodes here for the increased maximum life from unbending, then come up here for the increased Thorns Damage, then we come to the left for armor applies to lightning damage, cold damage and fire damage, while also picking up Prism Guard for 36% of armor applies to elemental damage. And then we come down to the left here and we grab the increased Thorns Damage along with block chance, retaliation for the increased Thorns damage if you blocked recently, and then gain physical Thorns damage equal to 10% of item armor on equipped body armor. And we come up here and grab all the increased armor nodes, along with defend with 120% of armor against projectile attacks. And then we come to the right and grab these Thorns crit damage nodes, along with 6% to Thorns critical hit chance. This gets added to the base Thorns crit chance before any modifiers, which is exactly the same as the boots. And then we just grab all of these crit nodes for increased crit damage, some extra strength, and then crit chance and some extra strength. Now where we split off down at the bottom, we want to come up here and grab the increased Thorns damage, along with 10% of Thorns damage leached as life. So whenever we deal Thorns damage, we also leech that back as life, which works great with rapid assault, as whenever we deal barbs to or quill burst, we also leech life from that as well. And then when I come down here, grab the dual socket and then the armor nodes that apply to elemental damage, with tempered defense for 15% of armor applies to elemental damage. And then we come down here for the life leech nodes. Life leech effects are not removed when unreserved life is filled, which means we're always leeching life even if our life is full, so that when we do lose life, we have so much regen from our life leech that our life just instantly gets filled. Then we come down to the bottom here and we grab iron reflexes. This converts all evasion rating to armor, and this pairs well with leather bound gauntlets. We gain +1 evasion rating per 1 armor on our equipped gloves, and since our gloves have such a great role for armor, we have 900 armor on the gloves without rune sockets, which basically just means we have 1800 armor just from these gloves alone. Then we come down to the bottom here where all the attribute nodes are. We want to come to the left and grab the extra strength nodes along with gem enthusiast for 5% increased maximum life. If we have at least 10 red support gems socketed into our skills, as you can see the top support gem capacity, the red gems are strength, so we have 15 red gems, which means we gain the extra 5% from this node here. We then also come down to the bottom, grab all the attribute nodes along with polymathy for the 7% increased attributes, come to the top for the extra jewel socket, and then all the way to the right for the other jewel socket. As for the jewels themselves, I currently have a Heart of the Wild Diamond for the damage is extra lining, crit damage bonus, and the physical Thorns damage equal to 5.6 of item armor on equipped body armor. This increases our damage a lot as well. As you can see, we lose 4000 damage on our maximum damage without this jewel. Then I have a Prism of Belief Diamond for the +3 to level of all Scavenged plating skills. This increases our 52 to 79 per stack up to 63 to 94. It's definitely an expensive jewel to have, however not many people are even using it to begin with. I was able to pick this one up for 40 divines, pretty similar price to Diala's Desire. Then I have a Megalomaniac Diamond allocated for Unbothering Cold and Pure Chaos. I picked this one up for Pure Chaos, so we gain 11% of damage as extra chaos damage, which is a decent chunk of damage as well, an extra 2000. But I went with this one because it had cold resistance and my cold resistance was not kept. Then I also have a From Nothing Diamond, and I have it for the Radius of Resonance. Resonance is this area up here, and this is primarily for the increased critical damage bonus, along with Style Bender. So hits break 30% increased armor on targets with ailments, 10 strength and 25 increased physical damage, along with for the Jugular for the 25% increased crit damage and 10 intelligence. And then the crit damage nodes right next to it. Since we have Hulking Form, we increase these by 50%, so each one of these is 22%, which is a huge damage increase for Thorns as well. And for the final jewel, I have a Time Lost Ruby. We want the radius to be large, along with increased effect of notable passive skills in radius, and small passive skills in radius also grants 3% increased Thorns damage. Now, I did get this with minions have 2% additional physical damage reduction, which is kind of unfortunate, but there wasn't really anything better that had the radius I was looking for. As you can see, the 22% increased effect, along with the 3% increased Thorns damage, works on the Thorns damage itself, and it changes all of the small nodes in the radius to have increased Thorns damage. So each one of these armor applies to elements has 4% each, and all of these small nodes here also have an extra 4%, and even these two nodes up at the top have 4% as well. Now this is my second character, and my Titan is currently level 94. I have 6 more points that I could use, however I've already beaten all of the content in the game with this build, so I'll probably be making my third character. However, with the 6 extra points from reaching level 100, you could technically pick up the 2 extra nodes here for the increased armor and the extra Thorns damage, along with picking up some extra armor on the tree as well. However, I'm pretty satisfied with the current state of it. I'll have in the description a link to my written build guide if you're interested in that as well. Maybe you'll be able to find something even better than what I've been able to. The last few minutes of this video is just going to be gameplay of my Thorns build in different endgame content. I hope you enjoyed today's video. I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.
A cowardly trick. It won't save you. The Wildwood's power is mine!
Salvation is written